Senator Zappone, you have 8 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Kirlick, and welcome, Minister, to the House. I want to begin by commending the work of the Minister for Finance during the very challenging years for Ireland and your own most recent work. It's been a difficult time for the Irish people and for the government, and I think especially Minister Noonan's fiscal discipline and ability to communicate clearly have been prime assets. You also have the ability to communicate clearly, Minister. The Irish economy is growing. We are financing our debt at cheaper cost, but we have not by any means reached full recovery. I think we're all in agreement with that, and need to remember that not raise unrealistic expectations before significant growth has been realized. I think then that we are taking perhaps a false start to fiscal loosening by aiming for a deficit of 2.7% of the GDP this year. I think it's too high. I also hope I'm proved wrong. We need to keep in mind that our public finances are still fragile due to the debt dynamic on our national balance sheet. Our debt to GDP ratio is still extremely high. The growth figures are positive, as you indicated. There are clear signals that the economy is recovering, but we need to be prudent fiscally and use the resources that are available in a way that strengthens the growth and contributes to our economic recovery in a fair and effective way. I do not think the bill before us does this. The main beneficiaries of this finance bill are the top 30% of those in employment with incomes over $33,800 who will receive the triple benefit of the USC changes combined with the rate and band changes focused on the higher rate of income tax. It's very positive that the marginal rate was kept at 52% for income above €70,000 despite the aggressive lobbying to have this lowered. The use of the higher rate of USC at 8% to cap the benefit of the reduced higher income tax rate is also to be welcome. In my view, this is fair. The overall USC changes will affect everyone in a positive way, including the low-income groups, and they are to be welcomed. And while I recognize the overall progressive nature of our income taxation system and the contribution to our tax intake made by the wealthiest 5% of the population, during the last 6 budgets, certain low-income groups, such as lone parents, have suffered disproportionately and should have been considered as the priority now that we have some room for maneuver. Instead, I think the finance bill prioritizes the relatively high income earners and big corporations, and the tax breaks provided for them cost approximately €500 million in revenue to the state. I agree with the economic argument that it is more effective to stimulate growth by providing spending power for the lower and middle income classes who will spend this money in the economy. The increased savings and mortgage payments to the banks that will be made by the higher income classes do not have the same positive effect. So, I was disappointed also to see that there is, and Senator O'Brien has referred somewhat to this, but that there's still no tax incentive for parents whose children are in early years education. The high cost of childcare in Ireland still prevents many women taking up employment, and a tax relief would have alleviated this burden in the short term. If we don't have a sufficiently funded public early years education system, and we do not, women's contribution to and reward from Ireland's reach for recovery will be muted. This is not fair. It needs to change. When will this happen? Some of the changes in corporation tax, I think, are too indulging for business and the wealthy, such as I don't agree with the changes to the Special Assignee Relief Program. Does the Minister have evidence that this is necessary and effective policy? I think Ireland is an attractive place for businesses, and we have many incentives for international companies to do business here, not to mention our well-educated and skilled workforce, so I don't think we need one more that isn't proven. And while I heartily welcome closing the double Irish tax loophole for stateless companies, why is this not effective immediately, or if not immediately, in 3 years' time rather than 6? I contrast this change with the policy of relatively high taxation on the modest income of domestic entrepreneurs. And further, it seems unfair that the modest incomes of the self-employed are taxed more than those of employees. Also, any irregularities such as the unfair tax treatment of PRSA pension schemes with regard to the USC liability of the employer's contribution need to be amended, I think, and I'd be bringing forward recommendations relating to this issue at committee stage. Minister, we all want an end of the austerity to provide for our families and lead the best lives we can. However, I do not agree with the government's vision that this would be best achieved by cutting taxes. The modest amounts of cash which will be impacted to a certain extent by water charges will not mark the end of austerity for Irish families nor provide them with the financial security they need. Many families in Ireland are struggling under the soaring cost of basic necessary services such as housing, childcare and health, which they are paying for disproportionately more than their European peers, and these costs won't be matched by the tax breaks. Hence, I think that the government could have, instead of introducing modest tax breaks, concentrated on increasing investment that would have benefited the entire population. Due to the low tax intake, we have one of the lowest public investment levels in Europe. The historically low cost of borrowing would have offered an opportunity to increase our capital spending, providing, I think, a more effective way to inculcate growth. By adopting this strategy, the rate of return to the economy would be well in excess of the cost of borrowing. I organized a public forum prior to the budget announcement in October in Tala, and I met and listened to the people's concerned about the budget and what they wanted the government to do. None of the people talked about tax cuts. They wanted better, affordable public services. I know also that many civil society groups submitted budget proposals, but the vast majority of these groups feel that their inputs have not been reflected in the budget decision-making in any meaningful way. I contrast that with the consultation on corporation taxation that you pointed out in the earlier part of the speech. I participated also in a post-budget conference hosted by the Free Legal Advice Centre, FLAC, who in an innovative way brought together the views of 39 NGOs in Ireland who work in the area of human rights protection. The overwhelming conclusion from their commentary is that the progressive realization of human rights should be taken into account in the budgetary process, both before the choices are made and after they have been implemented. The recession and austerity measures had a devastating impact on the public service infrastructure, and it will take a long-term reinvestment to restore this to a standard that meets basic human rights requirements. If we are to apply a human rights analysis to budgetary decision by pre-assessing how a measure may impact on people's basic rights, it would make a huge impact on people's lives, and especially those of the most vulnerable in our society. So I hope that, just my last sentence, I hope that then the Minister for Finance, in consultation with yourself and colleagues, might consider including this approach for the commemorative budget 2016. Play fair, play to win for everyone.
Thank you. Next we have Senator